Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the build up. Hello to Keith and everybody else out there. Nice to be here. This is one of my hot button topics. It's going to sound, I will just absolutely tell you, it's probably going to sound like I'm very cynical and kind of whining a little bit about certain things. And at the same time, all I can say to balance that up front is that these are my perspectives formed after, solid 20 years of doing wireless. So, everything I'm about to dump on you is kind of comes from real world experience and cases. So, just a little bit about me. Like Jim and Keith and some of you other good folk out there, I am a CWNE. My number is 200. Been around for far too long. I'm getting old, and I know it. There's my contact info. I do blog at WiredNot at WordPress.com, and I formatted that completely wrong. WiredNot.WordPress.com. Excuse me. And I should know better. And I've been fortunate, got a good long freelance writing career. If you Google me, you'll find I've been writing stuff since I think the year 2000, and I'm very thankful to be able to have those opportunities. How'd Jim get in here? Jim's a great guy. That's all about Jim. Jim is a Gemini. He likes windsurfing and potted plant. So, enough of my silliness. Today's topic: how fragmented is the wireless LAN space? Right. Every standard that comes out obviously is bigger and better than the last. It's always fantastic speeds and grand performance claims. But one of the things that work against them each and every time are the very clients that use those networks. And that's the essence of what we're going to be talking about, just kind of how weird this whole paradigm is from the client side. When I say the left hand ain't talking to the right hand, y'all, what I mean by that is, the IEEE and the Wi-Fi Alliance, they do great things. And for me to say they don't would be absolutely disingenuous. But at the same time, when these groups are chest thumping about the new standard and all the greatness that they're about to give us, the device side of the whole equation when it comes to wireless is just out of sync with all of that. And again, we're going to talk about all of this. So, you've got two sides or three sides, whatever you want to call it, of the industry. You've got the vendors, you've got the client devices, you've got the regulatory and the engineering agencies. There, in my opinion, are a lot of things that are out of sync, and that'll come through in today's discussion. Sure, we have standards, but when it comes to wireless standards, they're certainly different, to be polite. They're complicated, come along, in my opinion, kind of too often. It would be wonderful if maybe we all kind of took a pause and didn't rush forward into the next one quite so fast and actually got things right from the last one. And a lot of times we never even come close to realizing the potential of the last one before the next one comes along, which, to me is arguably out of touch with reality in a lot of spots. Those who put out the clients, I don't think they either understand or they care in a lot of cases. And when I say client devices, let me make sure that we are not just thinking laptops and mobile devices, but all of the wireless clients that we might find on our wireless network. It's a whole range of stuff beyond the typical compute devices: retail scanners, hospital equipment, wireless time clocks, various sensors, digital signage, things that, may have a computer underneath them, but just feel a little bit different, or things that are more appliancy. If it's on our wireless network as a client, I'm talking about the whole big soup here. And in some spots, they're woefully lacking. They don't do enough to address things that they should. So we get a lot of excitement that'll never be realized, and then we just continually have this, few aspects in the standards that are just flat out lacking. That I think the wireless world would be a lot better if they were actually, those gaps were filled in. Again, that'll come out as we talk. Let me take you off to the side a little bit, quick little detour. We're all wireless people, but we also have to be Ethernet people if we're going to be wireless people, at least to a certain degree, because if I'm not mistaken, that's how the wireless access points connect to the network. So entertain this quick detour. When we think about Ethernet and we think about Ethernet clients, there's not a lot of sophistication. Again, we're talking about clients, not data center stuff, but things that generally connect to our edge switches. Relatively easy to troubleshoot at layer 1 and layer 2. Wiring can be certified, and it's a good wire, it's a bad wire. That's pretty easy to definitively classify. Layer 2 for Ethernet is a heck of a lot more simple than layer 2 for 802.11. And when you think about the grand mix of Ethernet adapters that are in our client hosts, there's just not a lot of variability. There's not a lot of things that you can screw up in them, if you will. So I ask you to frame your thoughts as we go forward. Again, we're still under the heading of Ethernet. So when is the last time you worried about these? Is it going to work on my LAN? Is the Ethernet client going to work on my LAN? Is it going to work on a big LAN? Gee, what standard is this one based on? Sure, every now and then you'll get a 10100 switch, or I'm sorry, a gigabit switch that maybe can't do 10, and you've got old clients that only do 10, like in building controls or whatever. That's about as exotic as it gets as far as that question goes, in my opinion, or my experience. What speeds? They're pretty discrete and easy to know about. Is there any kind of weird security aspects when it comes to the Ethernet client? That's kind of a rarity. And again, there's just not a lot of Ethernet LAN standards to contemplate. You put the damn thing on the wire and off you go. I mean, it tends to be that simple. And here's a big one. When's the last time you've had to worry about, I plug something in at home, is it going to be different from Ethernet at work? If anybody is even still plugging in Ethernet at home. I know that maybe that's a flawed question because we're all so heavily wireless, but I think hopefully you get the gist. And as we pivot away from Ethernet and we talk about Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi is certainly just different, right? Every wireless network is different from the next in some way, shape, or form, and it's all changing, dynamically, constantly. For that matter, every cell in every wireless network changes constantly. And then as we home in on our topic, we know that clients, or I'm telling you that clients are a mix of capabilities, limitations, vintages, what standard do they support, and a restatement of one of my premises. Those putting out the client devices often just have no clue about what it means to turn them loose in an enterprise wireless network. What does an enterprise wireless network feel like? And I don't think they get it when they develop these devices. And again, another quick detour because it all matters. Before we talk about the clients, what about the infrastructure side? The clients kind of give us their own bag of headaches, but clients are nothing without the infrastructure, so we'll at least give a nod to some of these. In the 802.11 standards, there's a lot that the vendors need to figure out, how to implement, or even if to implement. This is all the optional stuff. Things like roaming is a big one. How does a client roam? What is the roaming algorithm? Yeah, it's up to the vendor to decide, the client vendor, or the Yeah, from the infrastructure side, what influence is roaming, and how do you do things like band steering and all of these things that may or may not have an influence on the client. There's a whole bunch that the infrastructure vendors can do, that you know isn't spelled out in the standards. This whole notion of how is the network going to work under the hood. Again, the special sauces thing, band steering is a great example of special sauces. It's just not in the standard. You won't find band steering in the standard. The vendors try to take advantage of things that are in the standard, but how they leverage these features, how they approach them, is all individualized among the vendors. I put simple client access in red because I think a lot of vendors sometimes lose sight that of the fact that the primary purpose of a wireless network is to get clients connected and simply let them work, let them do what they need to do. Once upon a time, you'd buy an access point and clients would get on, and that was, the big hoopla. Look what we're doing. We're not connected with wires. This is all, very portable and very mobile, and woo, this is great. And access points used to be the big story. You've got this great, wonderful access point and, range and capabilities and speeds. There was a time when all of that was what was exciting. And now access points are kind of down the list of what vendors want to talk about. Now you've got these giant, sometimes house of cards, feature boxes, and client access isn't always prioritized for wireless networks, and that's kind of strange. I know that vendors mean well. I know that they tout innovation and they need to have things to sell, but often, again, speaking from experience, they're creating as many problems as they solve. And if I focus on the band steering thing again, we all try it, we all end up disabling it, and there's a reason across every vendor's product set, or at least most of us do, from what I think I know and from what I hear from other people. And great that they're trying to differentiate one from the next, but they're also introducing problems that get in the way of client access. As networks grow, as they become bigger in both complexity and scale, code bugs show their ugly faces. There's a lot going on right now in higher ed. I will not name the vendor, but there's one major vendor that's really struggling with some stuff at scale, and a lot of ugly business comes out at scale. Not the vendor's fault. They're dealing with some client related issues, but again, the notion of things happen at scale, so it's very hard to QA is pretty important. So all that being said, we talked about Ethernet, we talked about the infrastructure. I promised you we'd talk about the fragmentation of the client device space, and that's what we're about to delve into. So again, with Ethernet, use that as our reference. Pretty easy to, get on a computer spec sheet or whatever, and uses gigabit Ethernet. That's all you need to know. That doesn't lead to 50 other questions about its capabilities. You know that it's gigabit capable, and off you go. With wireless, you might get some information that you need to know if it's going to be a good fit before a client comes to the network, or you might not. Some of the things that can be murky to figure out about clients. And this is where I'll pause and say, yes, we can get a lot of this from the packet captures, and we can get a lot of this about digging into the frames. And we know, many of us know that client capabilities are basically manifested in the frames, and you can figure out what a device is capable of after you get it on the network and when you need to start troubleshooting it because you're having problems. But the point I'm trying to make here is that it would be wonderful if there was more consistency and at least better documentation on the things that I'm about to list out here, so you could anticipate how a given client might work on your network. So output power, supported channels, A lot of devices out there that don't support all of the channels that you probably use in your network. That is getting better as a whole, but it's still not universal across devices. You know, whether it's a single radio device like on the mobiles, or whether it's a, you know, 2x2 laptop or a 3x3 or a 4x4, whatever, a lot of times that is not called out in any specs, any obvious, easily found specs. One of my favorites. Hey, we want to put this thing on the business network. Well, does it support our security? I don't know. How would I find out? Well, I'll probably have to call the vendor, because nothing in the docs that you just sent me says either way. Whether it's, you know, just PSK, or, you know, can do 802.1x, but maybe just only one or two obscure flavors and not the kind we use. All the important stuff. Note there's an asterisk when I talk about home environments, and we'll explore that one. So I'll just leave it here. But, you know, is this device at home? Maybe not a good fit for the enterprise. Roaming behaviors, already talked about that a little bit. You're just not going to know. And then even if you figure it out by testing, it might change in the very next firmware release. And, you know, good luck finding the vendor's explanation on roaming behaviors. And roaming behaviors on a wireless network where clients are meant to roam are pretty darn important. And optional standards, protocols required. Really hard to just look at a device's spec sheets, even if everything above this bullet were to be spelled out, and it never would be. What other goofy stuff needs to happen on the network? What other special circumstances does the device need on a network before it's going to work properly? And there are a lot of quirky wireless network devices that need everything to be just so, or they're not going to fit in very well. And as I pointed out before, a lot of times, you know, the client vendors, you know, what was their worldview when they put that thing out there? What kind of environments did they think that their stuff would and could work in? So back to that asterisk about the home network thing. Again, you know, I know I sound like I'm throwing dirt at the Wi-Fi Alliance. I don't mean to. To me, it's more objectively pointing out a gap is how I feel like I'm trying to come across, even though it may sound, you know, cynical, negative, whatever. Got a lot of certification programs, but they don't do anything meaningful that says this device is going to work great at home, where almost everything works great. Bring it to the business network and you may have problems. And that could be because the thing needs to be on a single Class C network. It could be because the thing needs to be on the same network segment as anything wired it might ever come in contact with. It might need multicast, and you don't run multicast in your wireless network. It may need to be the only client on an AP to work right. It may need its own SSID. It may need its own all kinds of things that fall apart when you get to the enterprise. And to me, again, that's a fairly major gap. I don't think it would take a lot of effort to define what it means to be consumer versus enterprise meaningfully, with good input from the field, which is one of the places I think the Alliance lacks, because it's a pay-to-play endeavor. And that's not a bad thing. It just, again, stating fact, it is what it is. But I think this is a problem, and you know, we'll see going forward some examples. Looking out the window to make sure there's not a white van with a guy with a crossbow from the Alliance drawing a bead on me here. But hey, we got standards, right? Well, hopefully by now you understand I don't think the standards go far enough in a lot of places. So things I have seen firsthand with mine own eyes along this topic. These Wi-Fi devices I've run across, I've touched, I've been frustrated, I've figured out how to accommodate. I've said we absolutely can't accommodate this, you name it. We've got different, you know, different flavors of what resolution was or was not in these circumstances, sometimes working with the vendors, developers to help them understand where they're short. But, you know, handheld retail ticket scanners, your Ticketmaster and your inventory devices of the world, police car wireless interfaces that only support a couple of channels and then have some goofy requirements behind that. Building control components, I think the people working on that are can be absolutely on another planet with how they think wireless should work and can work and some of the goofy things they do. And you know, you can read the list for yourself. It just goes on and on. The streaming devices especially are a great example of the things that work good at home, but sometimes crumble on a big network, or they sometimes need other things happening on the network that we typically don't or don't want to provide on big wireless networks for various reasons. Lab equipment, hospital, you know, hospital client devices. Probably none of this is news to some of you. So that being said, I'm just checking our time here. That being said, let me show you some glimpses from various environments that I support. Hopefully it's not too much of an eye chart for you. This particular environment, I think I grabbed from a branch location. Yeah, this is a university branch location. So, you know, the point here is if you look at the capabilities, we've got everything from 11AC to AX, and if you scroll down, you know, we've still got some 11N clients out there. If you were to expand this out to my entire kingdom, every now and then, even though we don't support 11B, I see an 11B device still come knocking on the door. You know, I'll see an 11A device still come knocking on the door occasionally. So the point here, there's 2 points, one I haven't touched yet, but the 2.4, or I'm sorry, the standards that are in play. This is a BYOD environment. I don't have sway over what network devices will show up. You know, maybe you have the luxury of doing that, but a lot of us don't. And this is just kind of sticking the thumb up in the wind and saying, you know, what's it feel like up there for a client mix? And you can see that it's a pretty good variety. The other thing I want to point out on this particular, this is from a Meraki dashboard, is the fast lane capable. For those who don't know, fast lane is a initiative, if you will, between Apple and Cisco that, you know, prioritizes, if you fully implement it and buy into it, it prioritizes Apple devices and lets them, you know, have enhanced performance. I'll just try not to go off on a tangent, but it's an example of one of those non-standards things that you may be faced with. Yes, I can implement Fastlane, but that might be great for Apple people on my Cisco or Meraki network, but it may leave other devices in a pinch if I don't implement it just the right way, or it may require yet another SSID as the demarc between the haves and the have-nots that maybe I would really rather not do. Again, but some devices can support Fastlane, and it's going to be the Apples, and some cannot. So an example of the fragmentation I talk about. This slide I'll probably use in every presentation I ever do on any topic ever. I used it the last time too, and God bless Scott for putting it on Twitter. He's trying to add a IoT device, and it will only work on 2.4. Again, you know, why spend a nickel, put in the other radio? But I can go better on this theme. I was actually trying to help people figure out why their consumer grade light panels, these ambiance lighting things that you tape up on the wall, why won't they join this particular network? This one product set could obviously detect 5 gig, but if there was a 5 gig network with the same SSID as the 2.4, it wouldn't join it. And it would say something like, basically whatever the messaging was, it says, we know there's 5 gig here. Change the SSID to something else because we don't want 5 gig and 2.4 to have the same SSID, and we can only connect to 2.4 even though we're aware of 5 gig. It's like, okay, what is this and why? One of the strangest products I've ever seen when you figure out what it has a beef with. Very strange. Thank you for letting me exploit you, Scott. You probably don't even know I am. This is a screenshot from a Cisco 8540 controller. And the big thing to focus on, if you go down to the bottom fields where, things are not supported. We don't support this client. These are the client capabilities as the controller sees it, things that the client doesn't support, which also implies that some clients will support it. So you've got a wireless system that needs to care about whether something is supported or not. And I don't even want to get into the specifics of what is and what isn't. The point here is some people got it, some people don't. Whatever the it is, I promise, is significant. So you, the wireless admin, has to contemplate everything that might hit your network. You have to somehow try to contemplate all of the various permutations of capabilities and things that client devices can do and somehow prioritize them into a formula that ends up being what your wireless network config is, except you, back to my earlier point, you really can't know about a lot of devices what they can do because none of it's documented. And the client device makers don't see fit to share it. Or to even, they probably don't even know what their own devices do. It's all very challenging. It's all very strange. This is a small business environment. You're looking at a Ubiquity dashboard. You can see that we have a mix of, if you look under the Wi-Fi connection field, we have a mix of 802.11n A and AC. So we've got 5 gig working in 11n. And what's interesting is if you look at the 11n device on the top, if you look at the signal strengths, how close they are together under the second to last column, look at the difference in rates. Again, there's no real point here other than just the crazy behavior among clients. Why is one doing 300 meg and another one at almost the same signal strength is only doing 162? Part of the reason is I know what the clients are, and one of them is lacking a radio versus the other. But again, it's just such a soupy mix of stuff, and somehow it's incumbent upon us when somebody comes and says, hey, the second client in my list is a lot slower than my other one, and you need to fix the network because I don't want to be that slow. I want to have the same speed as the other one. And then out comes the speech about, well, we have to consider your client devices, and this one does this, and this one does that, so on and so on. This is my own home environment. And again, you're looking here at a Ubiquity dashboard, and I know I'm pressing my time, so I won't dwell on a lot of it, but same deal. If you look at the Wi-Fi connection column at the top, we've got some 2.4 gig devices. That's all those devices are capable of. It's not what they chose to go to. A lot of them are fairly modern devices, last few years, and they're still locked into 2.4. And then we have a bunch that are 5 gig, and then different behaviors, signal versus data rates. And again, I know that there's a lot here to digest, but if nothing else, the point is, this is just a crazy mix of devices and capabilities. And in here, we've got compute devices, we've got some sensors, and there's a Chromecast, and it's just all over the place. This is a cafe slash little store. And here we have a mix of same deal, 11N, 11AC, Android printers. There was something significant about this particular slide. We've still got some fast lane capable, some not. Back to the Apple versus the world story. And I'm just going to let my thought that I had on this one go in the interest of time. Here is the spec sheet from an iPhone 12 Pro. It's like, okay, they're giving you a lot of information. That's great, telling you all kinds of stuff regarding 5G that I cut off at the top, the bands they play in, and tells you, it's AX, it's 2x2. Thank you, Apple, for telling us that. But what don't you see on here? Well, what's our output power? What's our roaming? How does this feel compared to the 11 that I might be replacing, or the 8 or whatever? All of that's upon you to figure out whether you have to change the network. If you wholesale swap out a bunch of phones for these, are they going to act differently? Again, what they're not telling you, and things that are very important to know from our perspective. We are getting to the end here, I promise. The red text I added because I just wanted to see. I went to Amazon, I looked at Roku's, and nowhere in the Amazon description do you even know what standard the individual Roku devices are based on. And it only stands to reason that some would be, products mature and products evolve. You don't know that when you're looking at Amazon. You go to buy a device and you have no idea that it's 2.4 only for the third one in, unless you go to Roku and dig around the spec sheets, and then you have to know what you're looking for. And how many people out there other than us wireless geeks know what we should really be looking for? So maybe this is failed marketing or something, but it's just more to me, more proof positive that the vendors just aren't realizing what people need to hear and know to make good choices. And my last, it's not exactly a bombshell. It really isn't about to get better anytime soon. I don't see anything changing any of this. We're all just kind of stuck with it. And maybe that's kind of anticlimactic, and boy, wouldn't it be great if there was some hope to offer? I really don't have any. It just is what it is. But I do know that it is important to call it out and talk about it and examine it and embrace it and realize just how messy the whole thing is, because it will help you to support your wireless networks better. And with that, I don't know if there's time for any of this, Jim, but
yeah, we can spend a few minutes on Q&A. We have a few good questions in from the audience, and nice job, Lee. And I actually share your concern. I think it's the fragmentation is going to get worse in terms of the gulf from the highest and least capable clients that are available. I think people are going to be, vendors are going to make 802.11n devices for the next decade because they're low cost and they want to make something that, in the IoT space, for example, just has really basic connectivity and is, extremely cheap to produce in the millions. So, you know, it's a growing concern for sure. So question here from Olivier. He says, Lee, with the surge of students coming back to campus, what is currently your biggest headache on your university Wi-Fi? Anything new in 2021, Lee?
So I'll try to be brief but complete. So, you know, you do everything you can do. You put out a really good wireless network. You know, it has to conform to your organizational policies, and you know, you've got the security that meets what the organization says it should be built into your systems, and you know, you do everything you can. But then, you know, students show up, and if they run into any problems or any perceived problems, like I don't know how to get on 802.1x, even though you give me a really easy tool to use on a network that is named what probably most of us would feel is obvious. This is where you go to get configured for the secure network. They show up and they can't immediately understand what's going on because they're overwhelmed with all kinds of paperwork, all kinds of forms. So they never really got the message on computing, and out comes the hotspot. And then the next person sees, oh, he's using the hotspot, I'll use my hotspot. And then it's just this copycat of hotspots all over the place. That's probably the biggest issue, is how do you effectively communicate to people, this is the network you should be using. And this isn't just students, this is adjunct faculty and everybody. So by and large, the biggest problem that I see is hotspots, and the growing culture around hotspots has nothing to do with our network goodness or badness. The culture is, you know, if I can't connect, I whip out that hotspot, and that's a really kind of a hard thing to, you know, hard thing to overcome and a hard thing to combat. So there's that. And then as far as devices go, it's always the consumer oddball stuff. You never know what is going to land in the dorms and whether you're going to be able to make it work on your current topology or not. And sometimes you actually have to say no and explain why. And you know, sometimes you can't do a workaround. But by far, it's the consumer on the technical side. It's the consumery oddball devices that are the biggest challenge.
Nice comment here from Anders, and I'm going to try and use this, Anders, but he says, I'm from time to time asked to build a highway that can make an old Model T go 120 miles an hour. So a good way of explaining the challenges with poor performing clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, kind of an extension of that, you know, fighting one of them this morning. It absolutely works at home. Your network sucks. I know your network is the problem because I don't have any problems at home. Well, you have a single router at home. You don't have, you know, enterprise security, this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, it's just, yeah, you build a great network, but the devices are still, each and every device is its own story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Maybe one last question. This is from Chris, who says, what's the best way to determine client abilities if the spec sheets don't show it?
Absolute best way. So if it's a device that you can get a hold of, the old PCAP, and you know, you read the capabilities and the various parts of the capture, that's going to be extremely helpful. If you don't have that luxury, I find myself going to the FCC database, and there's the FCC's own version, and then there's another one. I think it's FCC lookup dot something. But if you can find how they filed with the FCC and tested to be, you know, accepted for use in the U.S., You won't find everything in there, but you'll find a lot, like output power. You'll get a general sense of how the device was built. Like I say, you won't find everything, but you'll get more than, you'll do better than not knowing anything, I guess is a good way of putting it. And often you'll know enough to at least have a sense of how it's going to behave on your network.
Yeah, and if you're lucky enough to be, dealing with corporate-owned assets, you before they're procured, make sure you do a POC with them, get some demo units, and try them out on your network and find out what their performance looks like. Because even in that case, it doesn't really, you don't know until you've actually tried it. Put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a double-edged sword. You have to try it to know, but at the same time, you have to spend money to try it, only to find out sometimes that that money really never should have been spent because it's abysmal. So a lot of times you're Googling, you're talking to other people who might have gone down that road before. You're searching for other problems, people who have bought the hardware, like in different forums, might talk about. I know I get called on a lot of times to comment on, I've got somebody who's interested in using this particular video extender. Is it going to cause problems in our environment, or this particular blah, blah, blah? And thankfully they're asking before the money is spent, some wireless scoreboard, whatever. And a lot of times all you have to go on is your research and the conclusions you draw based on your own experience and what you think you can figure out about these devices really has a lot of impact on people when they come and ask you. So that whole research thing is, at least for me, pretty important in this whole equation too.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Don and Heather, I think we're a little bit over time. We should probably wrap it up then.
Yes, indeed. Thanks very much, Jim and Lee. Great job today, Lee. As always, we love your presentations. In fact, we love you so much. You're back next week, where we're going to talk a little bit about wireless LAN security and rogue access points. So again, thank you very much for the presentation today. And everyone, thanks for joining us. We'll see you all next Wednesday.